good, everybody? It's your girl Lil, and we're back for yet another episode of Out the House. If you're new here and you're like, dude, what is this? Hi, my name is Lilli. I'm your hostess with the mostest. And we're here to be saved by, submitted to, and sanctified through the love of Jesus Christ. And I'm just here to let y'all in my business for real. I'm not gonna lie. Of course, we're gonna get more into different topics. I'm gonna be teaching on different things through here, just like studying the Bible or whatever together. But a key thing that Holy Spirit convicted me about was actually letting y'all in my business and not hiding behind my ability to teach. So that being said, we're kind of continuing on this whole Freedom February thing, in which I share more of my story with y'all, my testimony specifically, in its totality, I guess you could say. I'm really excited for the most part, just to be able to remember. It's been beautiful remembering, even though a lot of the things that have happened were traumatic, to be able to be like, wow, I can reflect on this time because that's something the Lord has saved me from. So that's kind of what we're doing here thus far. If you're not new here and this is your second, third, fourth, fifth, however manyth time being here, I really want to thank you. I appreciate your support. And I would say if there is anything that I can do to serve any of you guys, please let me know. My heart's desire is to make sure that what I'm sharing is helping other people. Because I'm not just like out here opening up my entire life for fun. Like, I care to believe I'm rather private about a lot of things, but if the Lord has given me freedom, then there's no need for me to hide anymore. So no more hiding. And yeah, if you're new here or you're a returning guest, welcome here, welcome home, welcome back. And I would just say, if you want to stay connected and you appreciate the content, please do so. You can subscribe. You can check out our Instagram page. I have a Patreon community as well. And what's the other thing? We're going to be on Apple Podcasts, I think, a lot sooner than later. I think that might be like a surprise maybe for next month to myself for my birthday. Is like actually getting on Apple Podcasts, because I think that's going to be dope to be able to do that. So yeah, I think outside of housekeeping stuff, I think that's about it. So yeah, just to reiterate, this is Freedom February. I think this is by the time y'all see this episode, it'll be this is the last Freedom February episode. But I'm not just going to leave y'all hanging like the end of my story, or like not knowing the end of my story just because February has come to an end. So today we talking about college, okay? And not just any old college, but going to an HBCU was the best thing that was happening to me. That, oh my gosh, was the best thing that has ever happened to me. Honestly, before we get into that, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm perfect. I could go through and edit out all of the imperfections and all of the other things, but I feel like I want y'all to see in real time how my brain works. And sometimes my brain will be going faster than my mouth is. And like, I'll be on the next thought while I'm still speaking the current thing. So I'm trying to like slow down and ground myself a little bit more as we're doing this. So just bear with me, sweetheart. Just bear with me. So yeah, let's get into it. If you're new here, you're not too keen on like the whole cell block thing, you're going to have to go back and watch the episode. But I guess to summarize it, the Lord gave me language for how to like organize the specific blocks of my life, as if they're different like cell blocks in a prison or a jail. So it's kind of cool. especially knowing that I study like punishment and things in school. I was like, Holy Spirit, you snapped with that one. Actually, you kind of did your thing there. So this week we are on cell block 4, which is college, which is my mom passing away, which is yeah, I think relationships in there. What else happened during college? Duplicitous lifestyles, and really wrestling with God. I feel like, yeah, I feel like that's what this block is about as I'm reflecting on the days I was in college. So, as a segue into this week's topic, in terms of me sharing what happened in my life during college, I spoke a little bit about this, but I got a full ride academic scholarship to go to Norfolk State, which was a complete miracle from God. And it happened like super late in my senior year too. I thought I was going to be playing basketball, all of the things, but it just I just didn't have any peace in doing that. And so, it was just kind of like a last resort. I was like, yo, God, I don't really know, but what I have thus far doesn't feel right. And so he literally opened the door for me to be able to not only go to Norfolk State, but like go and not have to worry about like any financial problems or anything in terms of affording school. So that was kind of crazy, and we're not going to diminish the sheer miraculous nature of getting a full academic scholarship, especially at HBCU. And it's not to say HBCUs don't have money, but their funds may be limited. And so I'm grateful that the school that I was blessed to go to, like, it's always been improving. And so they've been getting more access to funds, thank God. And so just in general, as you can kind of see, though I like match my wall behind me to some extent, I am African American. And so the African American college experience absolutely changed my life for the better. And I can say that in hindsight now, because it was just not having to worry about or think about being a minority for 3 years of my life was ridiculous for me. It empowered me, it emboldened me, and it equipped me in several different ways. And so I'm eternally grateful to God for sending me to Norfolk State, because it changed my life. It really, really did. So I was surrounded by family for real, that I've never met before. And you don't really come across environments that are that like loving and caring and nurturing by nature. So Norfolk State was an extreme blessing and still is to this day. Like, I love that school down, and I see why the alumni and people, when I was even there, they came back in the way that they did, knowing the experience that I had. So, not a sponsorship or nothing, but send your black kids to a black school, please. Take it from somebody who knows, okay? So, outside of that, in the honors college, doing all of those things there. The academic experience was wonderful. I lived in the honors college dorm, which was co-ed as well. So that it kind of didn't, how do I say that? When it was like, when men were accessible, it didn't really feel like it was too like taboo, I guess. Because, on college campuses, typically like freshman dorms, or most of the dorms are like, well, at a HBCU specifically, are not co-ed. Or it'll only be like upperclassmen dorms that are co-ed. And yeah, I mean, maybe this was just my experience. But when like the homeboys are downstairs or upstairs or wherever, it's not like we had to go through drastic measures that would have got us in more trouble to hang out with him. And it's not only because, people always think, oh, it's only for sex that y'all want to hang out. No, like sometimes we just really want to spend quality time with our friends. And a lot of times when we don't have boundaries as young folks, that does happen, but it's whatever. So yeah, I feel like living in an honors college dorm, it was really dope. Like, mid-rise was so lit. Met some amazing people that I'm still cordial with to this day. And that shared experience of living there will always unite us. Even still, at this time, this is I graduated high school 2017. So August of that year, going to school, it was definitely a culture shock for me. And I say this because the hometown I grew up in was like cornfields, pickup trucks, MAGA, Trump flags. And so 2016, when Trump first got elected, it was a time. And so us black kids, we united, obviously, even though we couldn't vote, which is crazy. We still united and were expressing our ideals and values and who we would vote for if we were able to, basically. But there, obviously, it was much more than just like who we would vote for. It was about like bigotry and hatred actually having the forefront in my high school and my hometown. And so, we did like peaceful protests as black kids and things that radicalized me during that time, which absolutely led to me actually wanting to study political science and stuff. So high school was really instrumental in that experience. So I'd say coming from a predominantly white area, though it was diverse because we lived by a military base, the people in that county like go to school there, stay there, like get married, have kids, and like send their kids. So you know what I'm saying? Like, so people don't leave where I'm from. And every time like I'll be in the area, that is a core shared knowledge. People come here, stay, and don't leave. And it's not to say you have to leave or whatever. And I don't want to frown upon that because I knew I ran from my hometown for various reasons. But, even if you're a local in that area, like it's not a huge deal. But people really don't get to see anything outside of that county. And so coming from that, going to a predominantly black area, black school, black churches, black everything, it was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And I feel like if I'm talking about like my blackness too, I didn't really know this was going to come up, but whatever. My blackness wasn't something that I grew up consciously aware of, because my grandmother, she, for some reason, and I can only talk about this as what I've put two and two together to be, because I wasn't really able to have these types of conversations with her because she passed away a couple years ago before I even was able to have a lot of these convos with myself and the Lord. But she valued being like having proximity to whiteness, and not acknowledging her culture and things to some extent. And this, not to, jump on my grandma's case, because we had like, we were reading like the African proverbs and parables and stories and stuff. But I feel like, and like knowing about key figures, but outside of that, like the typical like Black History Month stuff, and that we had one book of like African stories and proverbs, and that was about it. Seeing the masks on the wall, like the tribal masks that my grandmother had, but it wasn't. And I think to some extent it probably was because there were experiential differences that I had versus what my grandmother had, because she grew up in the 40s. Like, she was alive and well during a lot of the things that we study about in history books today. And so as someone who was like instrumental in raising us, and it's not to say my parents didn't raise us at all, but again, my grandmother lived 4 houses down and she took care of us when my parents were at work, right? So we spent a lot of time at grandma's house. I really could not tell y'all why we didn't embrace our blackness more. We were always in white churches, and it's not to say, oh, all black people have to go to black churches or anything like that, because I'm grateful for that experience. And we'll get into that another time. But it was just like, maybe my grandma was like the token. And maybe that was a trauma response. I don't know. I really don't know. But I say that to say, like growing up, my dad had like the CDs and the hip hop and the rap and all of that stuff. But because of her faith, she didn't listen to none of that. And I respect it now because I adopt a similar lifestyle. But I feel like there's a balance that we can have as kingdom citizens, but also respecting our heritage, but not prioritizing our heritage over our faith and I think I'm saying that correctly, like not making race an idol. So I don't know. That's something that I wrestle with to this day, and I need to ask for more wisdom around that, because that's something that's beyond my years that I'm wrestling with. And I'm going to pray about that more intentionally. But I feel like she didn't make her race an idol, but I don't feel like she helped us understand our heritage much either. And like why blackness is, thank you, Holy Spirit, like the cultural richness of the black experience. I don't think we got much of that. And I know a lot of that is expressed through culture and hip hop and rap, because like they use that to tell stories and speak on injustices and, all of the things. And granted, it was vulgar, right? Excuse me. We can acknowledge the cussing and fussing and all of that stuff. That's not cool. And I respect her for protecting us against that. But not knowing anything for real was crazy. Like, I felt like I was getting smacked upside the head with kente cloth when I went to Norfolk State. And I know that's a funny way of saying that, but it's realistic to my experience, especially being in a predominantly white space too. I feel like my experience in high school of doing like peaceful protests and stuff with the homies and, becoming more aware, and then, hanging out with black faculty and staff at my school, like it was there, but I think I just wasn't like, like the switch just wasn't cut on. Like everything, the wiring and everything was set, but the switch just hadn't been cut on in my life until I had went to Norfolk State. So I don't know. I think that's something that we have to wrestle through though. Not making our race and ethnicities an idol, but also like respecting our heritage and prioritizing our faith as premier in our lives and superior. So that's something that was instrumental for me going to Norfolk State, and being with black folks for like at all times for probably the first time. So I think that kind of frames, I guess, my background and my headspace a little bit coming into that space. So it was a lot for me at first. It wasn't a lot in terms of it being unmanageable. It was just an adjustment. And something I learned very quickly is that duplicity has no racial bounds. I feel, or hold on, let me rephrase that, because I don't want it to sound like, I'm just calling, people black, white, purple, brown. blew out for being duplicitous. I feel like to some extent Black people are duplicitous in nature because we are a minority in this culture. And so even in non-harmful ways, and when I say duplicity, being two-faced, right? Having two different manners of navigating life, and some people call it code switching. But we see that because we have a subculture within a predominant, I'm sorry for hitting the mic, within a predominant, hold on. Let's just backtrack a little bit before I hit the microphone and it threw me off. African Americans have a subculture within the broader American mainstream culture, which obviously is a lot akin to whiteness. And so in terms of our experiences, to some extent, we've always had to be duplicitous. But it's so unique to see it playing out in my life specifically. And so when I get to Norfolk State, I'm still seeing duplicity, but in a different way. Not harmful at first, but being the space in which I feel like deception, but also just like the secret promiscuity and everything, like it was just another space for that to function in. You know what I'm saying? So at HBCU, we learn very quickly like who you is during the day versus who you is at the night don't have to be the same thing, especially with like partying, drinking, the sexing, all of the things, right? And so you handle your business during the day, you at your events, you at your meetings, and then after hours, you can see like completely different people and completely different sides of people. And it's not to say that like it's disingenuous, but it continues to like tear your being into two because you're operating as two separate people to some extent. Yeah. And obviously like there's elitism in every culture. At HBCUs, it's with the Greeks and, you know, the upper, I guess, echelon of the social hierarchy and things. But you just have to learn how you're going to navigate things. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to the duplicity of lifestyles, there was nothing really holding me accountable to changing anything. It was just, oh, I've learned the system. Let's just master this system. And obviously coming out of high school with the promiscuity, whereas that was a smaller environment, even going to a bigger space like a school. And my HBCU was smaller. Like, it might be mid-sized now, but it's a pretty small school, right? Like 5-6K on campus. And just being in a bigger pond, you learn the ins and outs. And so for me, stellar student, doing all of the extracurriculars, even finding extracurriculars that I actually like genuinely enjoy now that I'm not forced to devote so much of my time to basketball, even though I did enjoy it. I really did enjoy it towards the end. But I think there was just so much freedom when I didn't have to play anymore. Like I could play because I wanted to instead of being forced to. You know, being in clubs that were cool, that I enjoyed being in. It was so fun. It was really fun. But even on the flip side of that duplicity, you know, the partying, we did a lot of it to the extent that like me and the homies, we were throwing parties. And it was for a productive reason though, because when we would go to other people's parties, it would be really predatory and weird. And so we had our own kind of like vibe about us, with the girlies. And so we ended up creating our own spaces that we knew would be safe, and just hanging around the people we wanted to hang around. And so initially it started about, you know, a few of us, And then our group continued to grow, and we would all be hanging out and things and throwing parties. We would be throwing parties. I'm not going to sit here and act like we weren't. We was out drinking every weekend, finding some type of move, some type of club to be in, getting drizzunk, okay? But them grades was still tight, all right? So if you learn it, nothing else. I'm not condoning, drunkenness and that lifestyle anymore, because I, in hindsight, could be like, dang, I was avoiding a lot at that point in time and just adjusting in not a harmful way, like a harmful coping mechanism for my physical body. But at least keep your grades up. At the very least, because you're there for school, you're not there for parties. But some people do go to college to party, and it shows. So yeah, like we ended up starting to throw our own parties before we kind of got partied out for real. It didn't really last long. The transition was like, oh, we about to go to other people's parties, drinking every weekend, going out every weekend. Then we started throwing our own parties. And still on the same vibe. And then it kind of like calmed down. Like, okay, we're just kind of like, doing the kickback kind of thing. Spending more quality time with people and actually being able to like hang out on some chiller stuff. And then it would be like movie nights. You know what I'm saying? So like we went through the whole swing of things. 'Cause it was just like we didn't have to do that all the time. But like it was cool to have people who were flexible, where you could actually like kick it and have a conversation with folks, and also like turn it up and go have a good time. So we in fact did the turning up. A time was definitely had, but some really good people and wonderful memories were made in that process. So for me, in school, got there the end of 2017. Beginning of 2018 was my first year there. And now, with the promiscuity and things, at this point, Lilli started to get really toxic. So we talked about a little bit, and I'm going to explain this as we go. We talked about I wasn't aware of I didn't have language for or aware of the sexual trauma that I had been through. And so being unleashed into a whole different pond of people and experiences, partying, drunkenness, promiscuity, all of the things, y'all. And granted, again, I could have been so much worse than I actually was. However, it was just the line of thinking was toxic and came from a place of hurt and dysfunction. So getting to college, so towards the end of high school, becoming aware of the fact that I'm like conventionally attractive. When we get to college and mommy and daddy ain't around and grandma ain't around, I'm doing what I want, period. I'm doing what I want. I'm wearing what I want. I don't care what anyone has to say, right? So the rebellion enters for real. Rebellion enters, obviously looking back, absolutely from a place of hurt. Absolutely from a place of hurt. Thinking, just looking back, young and dumb. Young and very dumb. But also like so fragile at the same time. I just didn't know any better. I really didn't. And I thought I was doing, I did the best I could with what I had, not realizing that I didn't have a lot. Like trying to build a house with a Phillips head screwdriver and a hammer. It's not going to come out great. It's not. It's really not. And that's okay. Having grace for myself has been really important as I remember my testimony, because I have to view myself the way that the Lord sees me. Because even at those times, in those moments, even when I was angry with him and turned my back on him, he still loved me and was compassionate towards me. And so that's been something that's been really important for me as I'm remembering and reflecting on things. So getting to, where was I going with that? Oh gosh. Oh yeah. Thank you, Holy Spirit. The weaponizing my appearance and sexuality and promiscuity. Very rebellious, very Jezebel-y. And I feel like that's really when I was being very manipulative behind the scenes. And I just didn't consciously realize what I was subconsciously saying and doing and how toxic that was. And so something I would say when I first got to school, wild, and granted, young and very dumb, right? But looking back, hearing it come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I think that was okay? So basically, I was on this revenge streak for some reason. Obviously, I know that reason now, but on a revenge streak of doing men how they do women simply because I could. And don't be mad at me. Don't be mad, okay? But yeah, that was my thing. I'm like, I'm about to do these men. And obviously I didn't say it this eloquently back in those days. But I'm finna do these niggas how they be doing us. Dogging them out and, using them for their bodies and dipping, all of the things. And so I don't think quantity didn't even matter at that point. And it's not to say I was like racking up bodies, because I wasn't. But I was doing as I pleased. And I set my parameters for what I thought was right. Which was still very wrong. Very perverse. Very promiscuous. Very misguided. Very traumatized. Very hurt. Okay? And I didn't realize the ripple effects of the trauma that I had been through when I was younger were causing tsunamis in my life now, right? And so even one drop, the ripples continue to go and they grow and they grow and they grow until you have a tsunami about to consume an entire city, right? And it's not to say that was my sexual appetite, but it was just such dysfunctional logic that I had because I was hurt. Literally. Someone took my control and my power, so I wanted to do whatever I could to get that back by any means necessary. And look where that got us. Sitting here talking about Jesus. Yeah. But the more you feed, especially your sexual appetite, the more you feed that, bro, the more you realize just how empty it is. And you don't ever want to admit that to yourself. Literally. So, dang, that's about, I would say freshman year. My years, obviously I said I was in school for 3 years because I came in with college credits, and once those got approved, it bumped me up. So that was probably grace in and of itself. Excuse me. That probably was grace, that I was there for 3 years instead of 4. And then COVID hit the end of like my last year or whatever. So none of us were, and it's not to say, God had me on a leash. But it was grace. It was protection that I didn't realize that I needed at that time. So, I feel like that brings a wrap for, I guess, like freshman year into sophomore year. So this is 2018 at this time. Additionally, outside of my experience on campus, my mom is still going to chemotherapy and radiation because she has breast cancer. And so with that bump of me becoming an upperclassman at that point in time, what that means was I could have my car on campus. And granted, we was riding out. Me and my friends doing dumb stuff. Um, doing dumb stuff like hotboxing the whip off campus for what? Like, I don't even smoke for real. You know what I'm saying? Never even liked it, but was just doing stuff just because we could. And so I'm here to say, just because you can. Paul was on to something when he said that. Just because you can do it don't mean you should do it, because it's not all beneficial. Hold on, I'm gonna have to find that as I'm talking. Oh my gosh. Like, that's literally Bible. And so little did I know. Now I'm realizing what Paul was saying. Oh my gosh, I can't even spell. Yes, 1 Corinthians 10:23. It says, and I quote, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. The NLT version says, you say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say I am allowed to do everything, but not everything is beneficial. So, yeah, I found out that the hard way. And as your big sister, niece, daughter, mother figure, whatever I am to you, your friend, your sister, I'm here to tell you, as your sister in Christ, do not try to go learn it the hard way, because a hard head gonna make a soft behind every time. That was something I grew up hearing too, and never would have thought that I would be like, dang, it was right. So yeah. Sophomore year, got my car, sophomore semester / year, whatever the case. By the time the second year came around, I had the whip. So I didn't really have to think about a lot of things. I also moved off campus too. I live right across the street, but I also was able to move off campus. So that was nice. For the first time. The apartment was raggedy. My roommate was cool, actually. But we just wanted, by any means necessary, our own way. Southern rebellion caused me just to be in situations. I'm just like, why couldn't I have waited? Like, Lilli, why didn't you wait? Just why didn't you wait? So, and even with my little sister, like, she's junior in high school. She's about to be a senior. I'm like, girl, please learn from my mistakes so you don't have to learn yourself. Please, for the love of God, please learn from me. So, yeah, mom's still doing chemotherapy. I'm able to go home and stuff more often to see her once I have my car on campus. But it was a lot for me. I had to basically like choose between, to some extent, a lot of the extracurriculars that I was in, or like being there with my family. And obviously I chose my family. Because when your people need you, like, you just move. It was just that simple for me. Still had community and everything on campus. And I'm grateful for the friendships that I was able to have and still have to this day. But it was a lot for me that I didn't realize was a lot for me. And also relationally at this time, I'm still messing around. The first boyfriend that I brought up, still messing around with him a little bit. Trying to figure that out because I went to school. He was, I think he was a year younger than me. Yeah, I think he was a year younger than me. So he was about to go off to school. I was like a freshman, about to be a sophomore, but he ended up not going or something. I can't remember now. But, you know, still when I would be back home or when I would have the opportunity to be in Richmond, like still, you know, hanging out with him and doing grown up things that didn't have no business doing. But, you know, there was safety there that I valued. And that was important for me at that time. So, yeah, going back and forth home, spending time with Dukes and the Reester, which is my little sister. She's a really dope human being and probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I stand 10 toes down on that. At first, you know, me and my brother were like, y'all kind of messing up the program, bringing in a third party. But she's literally the bestest. Love her disown to this day still. So shout out to Kia. Love her. Um, Dang. So yeah, I think at this point in time, things are starting to get worse for my mom, health wise. At this point in time, I'm working on campus, I'm working off campus, and then so I'm starting to build a life down in Norfolk. But I'm also like juggling that with being back home as much as I can. So it was a lot to balance, but come the end of 2018, coming into 2019, the spring of 2019 was really hard for me. It got to the point where, yeah, I think at that point in time I was starting to drop out of clubs and stuff. I can't remember, but as my family at Norfolk State got wind of what was happening with my mom, they were so supportive, but it did take a toll on me. But I was still running, like operating at optimal capacity, not realizing that I've been exhausted for a very long time. And if there's one thing that sickness and death will do, grief will humble you and put a stop to everything really fast. So spring of 2019, coming into that year, February, March is when things got really bad. I was also running for like Miss Norfolk State at that time for my senior year. I was running against a couple of the homies and campaigning, doing all the fun things. It was wonderful. And I was still going back home as often as I could. Because I think I had weekends off for the most part with my job. So I would just hit a cute turn and burn and go home and be back. But as my schedule was freeing up, it was really nice to be able to do that. Yeah, when my mom went into the ICU in March, that's when things were really tough. She didn't want to tell me. Because initially, so just to give a rundown of what happened with my mom's breast cancer. Initially, we got the report or whatever when I was in high school. And, she was doing the chemo, radiation, and things. And then she was cancer-free at one point. I'm pretty sure the doctors were doing their jobs now. And they were honest about that. But I don't think that they were aware that it had spread into other areas or whatever the case might have been at that point in time. So she was cancer-free. We rung the bell, all the things. And then it came back with a vengeance. And that's when it got really bad. So when she was doing chemo and stuff, it was in her left set of lymph nodes over here. And then it was like spreading up or whatever. But when it spread into her lungs, that's when she went to the ICU. That was a tough call that I got back then. Now I'm about to cry. And I just remember like, I had started dating this one guy at that point in time. And I think it was like the second weekend we were supposed to be like going out before we got into like a relationship or whatever. And that weekend I had told my best friend and I was like, I need to go home. Like I can't do anything here. And I told him, I was like, hey, I can't be here. I have to leave. And that weekend, and I think it was after the pageant and everything had happened. So I found out that I was like, I had lost, but I was like first runner up or whatever. So that stung. I was like, and then, but I have other fish to fry. You know what I'm saying? Like that wasn't really a primary concern. It hurt. But I didn't have time to feel that at that moment. So going back home, no, I think it was before the pageant, actually, if I'm not mistaken, because that young man, I'm pretty sure, no, we weren't dating at that point in time. We were not dating. I can confirm. Cause one of the homies, oh my gosh. One of the homies actually from Richmond, that I was like interested in, but I wasn't really sure about. He had came down for my pageant actually, and he like was at my crib and everything. So, granted, like we ain't do nothing risque, but he was definitely, so I was not dating that young man at that time. But after that, yeah, mom gets admitted to ICU the second like week we were supposed to be dating or whatever, or going out on dates because he likes me. And I was like, okay. I was like, I have to go home. Like, I don't really, like, none of this other stuff matters. And then he was like, oh, like, I'll come and support you. And I was like, no, like, that's not your job, actually. So I absolutely said no. And then he, kept pressing, and I was like, I don't have time to deal with this. So, like, if you want to, sure. And my best friend's boyfriend, but now husband, is, he came with him, and they all, we all camped out in the ICU. But I was very frustrated because I didn't feel like this man that I had been going out on dates with for 2 weeks should have been meeting my entire family at this moment. So that really pissed me off, if I could be honest. But I didn't have the strength in me to fight about that. Like, this was the first time that I had really heard, that things were getting progressively worse. And that's when the doctors were telling us, like, it spread into, like, the cancer spread into her lungs. There's nothing we can do for real. Do you really think I had time to be thinking about a man? No. And context clues should have told you read the room. But granted, no, like after that, not to throw him under the bus. But we ended up getting together in a relationship because he was extremely supportive. And that actually did show me that I could like rely on him to kind of like, be a stronghold for me. So I really appreciated him being there, even though I really didn't think it was appropriate for him to be there. I feel like the relationship wouldn't have progressed as quickly if he hadn't been there. I feel like that could have been beneficial though, because we kind of just jumped into a relationship at a very, very fragile time in my life. And I just needed the support, actually. I really did. And so I could trust him to support me. So, excuse me. Yeah, that was that weekend. That was hard. That was really hard. April was hard of 2019. It was really, really hard. My mom was a powerhouse. And seeing that sickness take over her body like that was horrible. It was probably one of the most horrible things I've ever seen in my entire life. It was rough. I was home a lot, obviously, which that makes sense. And then May rolls around. Mother's Day, I was hoping she would make it, but she actually didn't. So the day before Mother's Day, my mom passed while I was home. Homeboy was with me. And if I could describe it, it was like the core of my earth had shattered into a million pieces and then threw everything else into disarray before I was aware of it. And so, yeah, May 2019 definitely rocked my world. And it doesn't get easier as you go. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no handbook for grief, especially grief that close to you. So, yeah. And when I would go to school and come home and stuff, like, I would see my dad, obviously, and, in proxy to my mom. But I feel like me and my mom had the most intimate relationship, to the point where, like, when she got an iPhone, I was the person she was sitting on the phone with all the time. Like, She would call me in the middle of the day while she was working or whatever. We would sit there and be working together. It was dope. I'm so grateful that my mom was able to get an iPhone like before she left this earth. But I still have to say, like, grief changed everything for me. It really, really did. And I probably would have made some really bad choices. I went through with some really bad choices in terms of like the suicidal ideations that happened at that time. If homeboy wasn't there. Yeah. So outside of everything, like even, with how I didn't appreciate that like my wishes were overlooked, I will forever be grateful for his support during that time because I needed it. Like, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I didn't. Like I did. And I'm grateful that he was able to support me through that time. So, yeah. Whew. So, come fall of 2019, right before I was about to graduate, man, I was about to drop out of school, bro. Like, when my mom got really sick in the ICU and everything, like, I was ready to drop out, but she wouldn't let me, obviously. As any parent wouldn't allow their child to do. But I basically virtually dropped out of every extracurricular activity that I could. Even with like the royal court thing, I didn't want to do that either. They had brought it back to where they were putting like the first runner up and stuff and second runner up and all of them, having all of us on the court instead of just Mr. and Miss Norfolk State. But I really didn't want no parts. I really didn't. It was really hard for me to smile and wave in the first year of my mom's death. So that was really tough for me. Really, really tough. I dropped out of everything. A shell of myself turned into the bottle. The bottle didn't help. Wouldn't even say I was like frivolous with my body. Granted, like I was still having premarital sex in my relationship at that point in time. But I feel like that was to some extent protection too when I was going through that season, because I really don't know like where I would be if it wasn't for the Lord and also just the protection and like the guardrails that he had around me in that season, even if I didn't see it at that moment. So yeah, it wasn't really a lot of good moments after that, if I can be honest with you. Over the summer, I had just went straight back to Norfolk. I had an apartment out in the area. It was like out ODU. They have like the roommate things in the duplexes. And I was working, I think at like Sam's Club at that time. Just the quick bread, right? Trying to, make sure the bills is paid. All right. That was really it. I had to call out so many times because I could not physically move. It felt like an elephant was standing on my chest. And I could not operate. Like there was just nothing that I could really do. And so it was hard. It was really, really hard. I did turn to self-harm as well, in terms of cutting. And yeah, like I really would have like did it then. But I think my next instance with self-harm was, I want to say in July, August. No, I want to say maybe August. It had to have been August, actually. Hold on, no, I'm getting my timelines mixed up. Because I was still in school at this point. It was after I graduated in May of 2020. Pandemic has hit all of the things by this time. And I was living out in Hampton at that moment. That's what happened. Yeah, okay. So my actual attempt was out in Hampton when I had lived there. Ooh, excuse me, the year after that. But self-harm entered the picture when I was living in Norfolk, for sure. I just couldn't feel anything. And like I felt the physical pain a little bit. I feel like that was the first time I probably felt something in a really long time. And that sucks to say out loud. It really, really sucks to say out loud. But I feel like hitting literal rock bottom after my mom passed, it showed me that I couldn't continue on in the way that I had been. And I was extremely angry at God. I wasn't surrendered at by no means, but I was still doing the whole church thing, thinking I was a follower of Christ, when I hadn't been denying myself anything. And he's very, like, Jesus is very clear. You have to deny yourself and pick up that cross and follow him in everything that he does. And that includes living a holy life. And I wasn't doing that. But I was still in that church, though, for sure. You know, occasionally when they had a little event or something, you know. But even still, when I went to college, I realized that I didn't have to go to church anymore. Like, I wasn't being forced. But there was still like that void of not having God in my life for real. That being in church, it made, like, I felt at home. And so, excuse me, occasionally I would still go. More often than not, I would still go. Especially when I was back at home, I would still go. But man, like, after my mom passed, I was mad. I was really, really angry. And what church and religion don't teach you is that God wants you to go to him with that stuff. Like, the Son of God wants you to go to him instead of turn away from him and turn to the bottle and the sex and other people for what you can literally get from him for free. Well, at the expense of you and your flesh. And, but you know, it's but a small sacrifice to make. And I didn't realize that. And so I didn't realize that I could really bring my frustrations to him until it bubbled over for real. Yeah, and so much of my walk with the Lord was really me not having to give anything up. But at this point, all I had was anger to give him. And yet he still was like exchanging that and giving me peace. When I would let him. But a lot of times I wouldn't let him. And I was really restless in that season. So, yeah. Very desolate island I felt that I was on. But to see the Lord's grace when you look back. So fast forward to graduation, and then I moved to Hampton after living with my aunt for like 2 months, I want to say. Moved to Hampton, and homeboy, I was still with him, so he had come to stay with me in that apartment. So we're cohabitating, still doing things outside of the will of God at this point in time. But I know that there was one day specifically, he was in the band and everything, but he couldn't reach me because I was literally like on the floor crying, contemplating if I was going to like try to end it all, actually. And it was that day. No other day had this ever happened, but it was literally that day. Because he couldn't get in contact with me. I had like cut my phone off and everything. And he left from Norfolk State to come back to Hampton just to make sure I was okay. And dude, if he hadn't did that, child, we don't know where Lilli would be. And granted, obviously, I'm so grateful for God, like, and he never really had a relationship with the Lord for real. But God can use whoever he wants. Whoever, whenever, however. And one thing that he wasn't finna allow was me, of my own volition, leaving this earth. So yeah, he had left practice that day and came to Hampton just to make sure I was good. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if he stayed or he went back, but he just had to like, bro, you good, bro. Like, and I was like, no, I'm not good. And lost it, obviously. But he made sure I was good. You can't make that up, man. I just didn't have anywhere to turn, you know? I didn't have anywhere to turn. And I didn't ever think that I could turn to the Lord knowing the anger I had in my heart towards him for taking my mom. Yeah. And y'all be trying to play like y'all don't get angry with God. Yeah, okay. I was pissed and stood 10 toes down in that. I was very angry about a lot of things, but I was really just angry that, like, God didn't ask me, or he didn't check with me when he took my mom from this earth. And I'll never forget the day, like, Holy Spirit showed me how prideful I was being. Because when I was actually expressing some of that anger finally to God, all it took was, like, as I was journaling and doing the things and praying, he just made me aware. Like, he just opened my eyes to me and what I was saying, right? And so in that, I can't even describe it. It was literally something supernatural, because it's a difference between, like, saying something but hearing yourself say what you're saying. And that's what happened to me then. And so when I heard myself and how ugly, like, just the arrogance had made me sound, I was like, oh my gosh, her death has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do. And so that's something we don't talk about when it comes to grief, in terms of, like, you're not only grieving that person, but you're grieving the plans you made with them here, the expectations of your life with them here, like the goals you had in mind, the vacays, the trips, the promises, the vows that are left unfulfilled because they're not here anymore on this earth. They're in the ground. And so I tell people all the time when it comes to grief, like, you have to make sure you're not only grieving the body you're putting in the ground, but you're grieving everything in that relationship. Because you have to. Or you're going to be angry and filled with rage for a really long time. Really, really long time. So, yeah, man. Coming to the college days, that was a lot for me. And I think looking back now, sheesh, man, I needed to be protected from myself. God needed to protect me from me. Because our self-destructive behaviors are the automatic thing that we turn to. And so people don't want to think about that like that. Like, no, I have a tendency to want to blah, 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 simply because of these, fleshly things that we're in right now until we pass away. And, no, we don't think about it like that. But, child, I became painstakingly aware with my self-destructive tendencies. And some of them, I'm like, bro, why am I turning to this? I ain't never, you know what I'm saying? And I realized that too. It does deal with, like, things you inherit generationally too. So when you, like, for example, like introduce, like, I get, hold on, how do I say this? When lust and just like, I was sexualized so young, and then Pandora's box had been open my whole life, it just felt natural to want to feed that desire. And I feel like that's something that we don't talk about in terms of the alphabet gang either. Like, we try to normalize specific appetites just because we've experienced them for so long. But engaging in homosexual behaviors isn't more natural than having premarital sex. And we're not going to sit here and make a hierarchy of sin. We're not. Sin is sin. And Jesus got up on the cross and died for all of it. And so in response to the sacrifice that he's already made, why would I go back to a sin or a lifestyle that he's already paid the price for? And we don't view it like that. I didn't view it like that, because I didn't fully grasp what Jesus' sacrifice really meant for us. And I feel like if I would have heard it sooner, how much more would I have responded? And it's not to say God's timing wasn't good for my life. I'm not saying none of that, because it's all brought me here in the first place. And I just want to equip a generation who doesn't have to learn it the hard way. Like, that is the ultimate goal, for a generation to not have to learn it the hard way. But I know that that's difficult because of the world we live in, right? You know what I'm saying? But God is raising up a remnant in my generation, in the next generation, even in generations prior, you know? And so it's encouraging. But dude, like, if only the gospel would have smacked me upside the head, 10, 15 years ago? Like, imagine where I could be. And so, again, all of the things that I teach on and say on this podcast, like, I'm not speaking on these things because it's clickbait worthy. It's because I lived it. And I've turned to the bottle. I've turned to the sex. I've turned to the promiscuity. I've turned to the homosexuality. It's all empty. None of it works. My soul was only able to rest when I found Jesus, because he had always been looking for me. So I think that's a good place to stop for today's episode. Next week, let me look at my notes. So I think I need to give y'all an update, though, like, about where I'm is now, you know, in terms of the past 5 years, what my life has looked like, especially in the last, year and some change, that I gave my life to Christ and I finally surrendered. So, dang. Is this the conclusion of Freedom February? I think so. Obviously, I'll still, to start off March, definitely going to give you guys an update for the last 5 years when I moved to Massachusetts, started grad school, all of that. But to God be the glory. Literally. So, as we continue to walk and talk and actually live this thing out, I hope you guys can always come back to these videos to give you context of what the background is as to why I say the things that I do. I don't ever want to, and I said this before too, bro. Dang, Holy Spirit, thanks for bringing this back to my mind. Like, I don't ever want to preach about something I haven't, lived through. I don't ever want to just be saying, and granted, yet, like, I know the Lord gives wisdom and revelation, don't get me wrong. But I never want to lose the insight that comes from being in it and now not being in it anymore. And I ain't saying, God, I ain't saying take me through the Richter though. Like, don't do that. But I'm saying that to say, Lord, I finally understand. And it's not that you ever wanted any of those negative things for me. But I only went through it because, one, you knew how it would turn out, and two, to use it for the kingdom. So that's humbling. I'm really grateful for that. So we'll wrap up here. Y'all are officially in my business for real. I'm grateful to have you here. I'm excited to see what the year holds. So I love you guys. And till next time, peace.